Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers on SI. Joey Van Zummeren, Michael Stamps here to talk about Mizzou football recruiting as this class is coming into shape now at 7 commits on the class. I would say by next week, probably looking at probably just around half of this class being filled out. Knowing the names there, I'd expect just under 20 in this class. So excited to talk about the 3 most recent commitments we have coming in today. Michael, just what are your thoughts on how this group is shaping up?
Yeah, they're interesting, aren't they? Definitely not the highest profile names yet. I like to remind people that the rankings don't stop right now. They have another season of football to play in high school, so where they stand right now likely won't be where they stand. At the end of the recruiting cycle. I mean, I texted you this yesterday, Joey. Devyon Hill-Lomax rose 300 spots or 400 spots in the recruiting rankings from like 1,300 to 950 or something like that after committing to Missouri yesterday. So I don't know why that is, but just naturally, these guys are going to start to rise up the rankings a little bit. So there might be some concern about the quality or the national perception of the guys that Missouri's getting. I mean, there definitely is. I think people are certainly questioning it, and it might be a valid concern, right? You can look at where this class stands right now compared to the last couple ones where you're bringing in multiple 4-star talents and a couple of those with 5-star guys. It's not that right now, so there definitely might be some questions as to what the thought process is with bringing some of these guys in. That being said, when you really look into the details of some of these guys that they're getting, especially like Khalief Canty and Devon Hill-Lomax, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, there's a lot to like and very high ceilings and a lot of potential with those guys. We've really kind of beat this message over where if they're going to focus on the transfer portal, it allows the coaching staff, Eli Drinkwitz, to specialize and zero in on recruits who they think are going to develop and want to stay longer, and they're going to find the traits that they really like. So definitely an interesting class so far. There, like I said, might be a valid concern that it's not as talented or as highly ranked or as nationally viewed as good compared to previous classes, but I still think there are a lot of intriguing pieces, and it's only getting started as well. There's going to be more coming here soon.
Right. And I wanted to ask you too, because a lot of the attention obviously is just on the star ratings for obvious reasons and valid reasons, I would say. But it feels like there's not one big fish that Missouri is trying to pull in with this class at the moment, at least. There's not a Williams Winery, but to that point, you look at last year's recruiting class for 2024, where Missouri, or not, well, yeah, 2024 is not 25s, where there was a lot of those 4 or 5 star talents. And looking back at it, though, 4 out of the top 5 rated players in that 2024 class transferred out after the first season. And we've talked about before the risk of investing so much money in those highly ranked players, and you're seeing schools stray away from that a little bit more. Would you say that it's true though that there's really not a big fish that Missouri is going after, and that you can see that they are trying to stay away a little bit more from that blue chip talent, even though obviously that's where the elite players are?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think there's still I would say 3 guys, when I look at the dudes who have visited and have expressed interest and are, deciding with Missouri in mind. There are 3 names that come to mind, for, like, quote, unquote, "blue chip." I don't know what we're classifying as blue chip or not, but you have Ronell Johnson, who's a 4-star, edge from Missouri, from Blue Springs, which I believe is Kansas City area, correct? Um,
Yep.
yeah, so he's, consensus top 200. I was actually just looking at this earlier today. He's, a top 70 player and on 3, so he has a lot of national hype. I think if they could pull him in, that would end up being the big fish. One of those big fish guys committed yesterday or 2 days ago on Wednesday, and that was Danny Beal, an Arkansas guy. I was surprised that that wasn't a guy that they ended up getting. He committed to Oklahoma State, which was like way out of left field. It sounded like it was a pretty quiet recruitment, but That's a guy that I thought they had a chance at. That doesn't go well, obviously. But other names, just keep an eye on Jaden McGregory is a four-star athlete who is committing soon. I would imagine they view him as a safety. He's a Des Moines guy. He just took an official visit to Louisville. There's a fun story around Jaden McGregory. Obviously, he got that crystal ball. Wasn't too fond of the crystal ball. So we'll see if anything changed there. He's committing here in a few days. He'd have a chance to be the highest ranked player in this class. There's also four-star offensive tackle Evan Goodwin, uh, our ping pong player. So there are guys, there are still four-star guys, and there are a couple of these dudes as well who are not composite four stars, but some sites like more than others. Khalief Canty is one of those guys. Rivals is like really, really, really high on Khalief Canty, like top 200. So, like I said, I think some of these guys are still gonna start to go up the rankings, and maybe they have a blue chip guy, but he's not nationally viewed as a blue chip guy yet. I think if that's gonna be anyone, it's gonna be Khalief Canty. But you also, I mean, you do have Keenan Harris and Jabari Brady, um, who are generally consensus four stars, and same thing with Gavin Sidoir. So you do have guys there who have chances to go up, but at the same time, to your point, um, there definitely is some truth that they might not be going after these guys as much. They're going after guys that they know that they can develop for a couple of years, um, in mind that they're going to stay. So I think there's truth to that, but there also are a few names left that I would consider, bigger polls that would really benefit this class. I think Jaden McGregory I would place at the top of that list. Evan Goodwin, we haven't really heard much from him recently, so I don't know what I think there's kind of some questions about there. He doesn't have a commitment date yet, so that'll be an interesting one to follow. But yeah, there are some names around, and Ronell Johnson is also kind of another one where he had an official visit, but we don't exactly know what's going on there. So there are guys we don't really know what's going on. It'll be interesting to follow, but there definitely are names left. I think that you would classify as good polls if they could do it.
All right, let's talk about their three most recent commits now, starting with Maxwell Warner, the running back from Chicago, same high school as Dennis Gates, of course. And I gotta say, I really enjoyed his commitment um, announcement. I didn't necessarily find the Chicago news broadcast interesting, but I don't like over dramatic commitment announcements, and those seem to have certainly died down. But he kept it simple, and it seemed very wholesome to have his mom there with him, who is a broadcaster for ABC 7, I believe, and also learned through that commitment announcement that he plays saxophone. So I'd love to see him and Honor Botain, the basketball player that also plays saxophone, form a band. That'd be cool. But what can you tell us about Maxwell, and what do you think of his tape?
Yeah, good physical runner. I think he's I don't want to say he's undersized, but a little bit on the smaller side. So he has more of that speed aspect to his game. Another one of those guys in a similar category, I think, to Hill-Lomax, who might not be the highest ranked guy right now, but has potential to rise up those rankings. I think he did, again, receive a rankings boost after committing to Missouri. I don't know why that's the case, but it happened. But like I said, I think more of a speed oriented um, back, and I think he can really he can do a lot of things. He can get involved in the receiving game, a little bit shiftier as well. So I like Maxwell Warner. Um, that being said, there were some misses at the running back spot for Missouri that I think some people won't love. But Maxwell Warner, great player. I think he's going to keep rising up the rankings. Very athletic. I like what he can do in the receiving game as well.
Right. Yeah, I think this comparison is just coming to me now, but it's what I was kind of searching for when trying to describe Maxwell's speed as a runner and just his running style. It's almost like Bobby Boucher and Waterboy, and where he just kind of sees sees green space and just goes for it. And nobody can get in his way. But I think a lot of that too is a credit to his vision, and it does show up as a blitzer as well. And that's where you can definitely see a lot more of the water boy in him, where he just sees the quarterback. He plays defense back as well, and there's a lot of great tape he has as a blitzer where he just speeds after him, which is fun to watch. And then next up, Khalief Canty. You talked a little bit about what do you think about him and specifically his versatility?
Yeah, when I wrote that story, I think it's really impressive. He can literally play any position. He's lined up as guard, tackle, and center. Super powerful. I think he also has room to grow into his frame. He's around 6'5", 310 right now. When you look at that build itself, you probably think offensive guard, which would make the most sense, I think, right now. But he's athletic enough to kick outside and play tackle. I think he has really good hands. He's a very powerful player. Good first step. And again, so many of these these like offensive line recruits are really evolving with their athleticism, and I think Canty is a good example of that. Now, I think they are certainly more athletic players, so I'm not going to completely overhype that. But he does have good speed. I think he's pretty technical as well with his footwork, which is nice. Um, and I think the coaching staff's going to have a choice to make when it comes to where they want to slot him in. If they want to, bulk him up and kick him outside, or leave him how it is, or transition him to a center. I would think center is probably the least likely of those options. But very versatile player. Can and will play all three positions this year for Cass Technical in Detroit, which I find fun, and that's also just a good experience as well. And a lot of those skills can translate. Um, but right now, presents as a guard to me. Very strong player. Always good to see a guy who has room to grow into his frame as well. Um, Loved the official visit photo with the tiger on his head. That was awesome. But yeah, Canty's a great player. Like I said earlier, I think if there's one guy who is the most likely to rise up the recruiting rankings a lot, it's going to be him. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Uh, this is a fun one. He's from Michigan. He chose Missouri over Michigan State. If that means anything, I don't know if there's really much of a Missouri or Michigan to Missouri recruiting pipeline. Probably not. So that's always a good thing as well to get your feet in different areas there. But Khalief Canty is an exciting commitment. First one on the offensive line as well.
Yeah, I just thought he was such a mauler, especially at tackle. And like you mentioned, he is a bigger, more a size you'd expect for an interior offensive lineman, but just because of the power and athleticism he has, he is able to protect on the perimeter as well. Probably just on the brink of not being too tall to play guard. 6'5", probably fine there if he's an actual 6'5". And then we'll be interesting. I mean, 247 has him at 305 pounds right now. So see what Missouri wants to do with that frame there and what position they want to play him at. And then finally, Devyon Hill-Lomax, 6'4", 180, tall guy for sure. What did you make of his tape?
Really, really interesting player. He is tall and he relies on it a lot. He's fast as well. So I think he's definitely a physically gifted player, but a lot technically has a lot of room to grow. If you watch his tape, he doesn't really do anything in the middle of the field. I mean, he does, but most of his receptions are just go routes or things down the field where he doesn't have to really use much of a route tree at all. He can just beat people with his mainly with his height, but his speed as well. And when he does get some after the catch ability, or on a screen or something in the middle of the field, he's actually really productive. And um, his size, allows him to break a lot of tackles. One thing I had to correct myself before I wrote my, what are we getting story for Devyon Hill-Lomax is like he plays at a high level. Now I don't know much about Illinois State football, but I think he plays at one of the higher levels there, if not the highest. Um, so he has a high competition level, which I think is really important. That he is physically dominant and relies on his physical traits a lot, but it's not like he's doing it against horrific competition. Like these are good players. Now you're not going to find many 6'4" defensive backs in high school. In college, it's a different story because athleticism gap and they're just better. But relies a lot on that. Definitely going to have to advance his route tree a lot. Same thing with his release. It's just beat the guy with your speed and beat the guy with your size. So footwork needs to get cleaned up. Uh, Really good run blocker as well, which I found really interesting. Like that shows up in his tape a lot, like very, very quick. Um, must be something he prides himself on, but I think that's going to be something that Eli Drinkwitz and that coaching staff will really appreciate, especially his willingness to do so. When you talk about raw potential, Hill-Lomax might have the most um, out of any of the guys we talked about so far, and maybe even of the 7 guys in the class. There's a lot of untapped potential there, but has a long ways to go, I think.
Yeah, I so being from my high school was actually in the same conference that Edwardsville plays in. So as far as what you're talking about competition wise, they do play East St. Louis, which is just a dynasty over there. Very talented program. A lot of players that have come to Missouri and other blue chip talents produced through there. They also play Althoff. They play O'Fallon High School in that area. So a lot of talented teams and players over there that Hill-Lomax going up against. He also went up against. I saw in his huddle tape he went up against Nick Hankins, the Belleville West cornerback that Missouri was pursuing for a little bit, and then eventually ended up committing to Illinois. And it was fun to see them go up against each other for a few reps. Specifically, there was one in run blocking that you mentioned in your story on Devyon, of his ability there, where he is getting physical with Nick Hankins, which was fun to watch. I think he does have the size to be good at that. And again, like you mentioned in in your story, it's something that Missouri is going to ask their wide receivers to do. Going to be important in any wide zone run scheme out there. And yeah, I mentioned he is a high jump athlete in track and field, and maybe you would have some perspective as a former track athlete yourself. But at first going into it, I was like, I feel like it'd be grasping for straws to make much comparisons to how that could help him out compared to it's a lot easier to do when it's a actual like running event, but you could see quite a few times actually how Devyon is like going for back shoulder catches like Odell Beckham Jr. except with two hands. um and it is pretty comparable, so lot to work with there for Devyon.
Yeah, a 6'4" high jumper is very fascinating. That's unusual.
All right, that rounds out the guys in this group now. Like I said at the top, though, by the end of next week, we should have an even clearer picture of what this class is really going to shape out to be. So, Michael, what can you tell us about some of the commitments coming up here?
Well, I actually, writing the story at 3 in the morning, I actually wasn't as, confident with some of the guys that are about to commit as I might have once been. Um, there's a list of 7 committing over the next 2 weeks between, Sunday and July 9th. First of those is 4-star offensive guard Brandon Anderson, former Tennessee commit. Another one of those where we don't really know where things stands right now. He's decided between Tennessee, Missouri, and North Carolina. It seems like it's between Tennessee and Missouri. Like I said, former Tennessee commit. He's just coming off his official visit there. Kind of makes sense to give the lean to Tennessee since he has plenty of experience there, but not much information. Next is 3-star linebacker J.J. Bush. He's committing on Wednesday, July 2nd. This is one where Missouri's really, really been involved there for quite a long time. Um, and it would be, I don't want to say it would be a surprise if they didn't land JJ Bush, um, but it would certainly be unfortunate. He's coming off an official visit to LSU. Seems like that visit might have gone well. If anyone is pulling him away from Missouri, it's going to be the LSU Tigers. Again, not too certain there, but uh, that's a commitment that could put a interesting ripple effect on this class. We also have Adam Balagoon Ali, who's a linebacker that took an official visit um, to Missouri last week. Uh, I don't. He just picked up a prediction to go to Auburn, so I don't know if that means there's a domino effect there. If that's a guy that wanted to go to Missouri, but JJ Bush is going, so that could be something there. But if they don't land JJ Bush, it doesn't seem like Balagoon Ali is going there. So if they don't get either of those guys, then I don't know who the linebacker is in this class, and that's a position that they might want one of. So that'll be interesting to track there. Next is 3-star safety Tony Forney. He's a Georgia native, committing Friday, July 4th. No idea what Tony's doing. Couldn't tell you, honestly. He has a final list of 5 schools. Seems like it's down to Missouri, Wisconsin, Pittsburgh. He did take an official visit to Georgia. Um, when you look at their class, I don't think Georgia's going to take him. No disrespect to Tony, but they have multiple 4-star, 5-star defensive backs already. And that's another guy who is rising up the rankings, so maybe they trust that he's going to continue to move up. Um, but I don't know if they're gonna take him. So seems like Missouri, Wisconsin, Pittsburgh is kind of the three there. But if I couldn't pick one if I had to. He took official visits to all those places. That will be a big one. Again, I think Tony Forney is a very good player and will move up the rankings. So that'll be an interesting one to monitor. Three-star defensive tackle Katron Harris is committing on July 5th. He was a new guy. This was one I that came as a surprise to me. He was scheduled for his official visit this last weekend, right before it happened. So interesting stuff there. He's deciding between Missouri, Cal, UCLA, and Arizona. He plays for Compass Prep in Chandler, Arizona, which is like a really good basketball high school or prep academy. I didn't even know they had a football team, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. Um, I would actually feel pretty good about this one if I were a Missouri fan, especially with Danny Beal headed elsewhere. They've been after multiple defensive tackle targets. Um, I had the chance to talk to Katrin. He seemed pretty enthused about Missouri. Um, they weren't really in his final list of schools anything before that. Then obviously they vaulted to his top four after. When you look at Missouri, UCLA, Cal, and Arizona, and the shape of their program, Missouri is probably at the top of that list. Would be fun to pull one from the West Coast because you don't really see that often with the Tigers. So that's one I'd feel good about. He's committing July 5th. Four-star athlete, likely a safety, Jaden McGregory from Des Moines, is committing on July 7th. Like I said, seems like Missouri has the crystal ball as of now. He's coming off a visit to Louisville, also officially visited Minnesota. Will be an interesting one to keep an eye on. He will be one of the best players in this class for Missouri if he does commit. So cross your fingers there. That's one we'll probably know more about as the time comes closer. If more predictions start to file in, usually if one can come in for a guy, then if there's going to be more maybe. So will be an interesting one to keep an eye on there. Three-star Javonte Smith is committing on July 8th. Was supposed to commit this last Tuesday. Moved that commitment back. No idea why. Um, but the only thing I said in my article is it gives the teams a final or more time to get a final pitch in there. Seems like it's between Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee. Um, Again, you look at Tennessee with the other talent they have on that team at the defensive back spot in the recruiting class. Um, doesn't seem like a guy they'll take right now. I should mention that he's likely going to play cornerback or safety. I believe it's safety. So it seems like Arkansas and Missouri would be the two teams there. The picking one couldn't do it. And then last and not least, but not least, three-star safety Joel Combe committing on July 9th. He's a teammate of Tony Forney Jr. I do not believe he will be going to Missouri, but he still is considering Missouri in that instance. Would be a good one. Maybe they can get Forney and Combe, and they team up together. They have some crossover in their final list of schools, but Combe seems like a guy who might be headed to Tennessee. So that's what I have for you right now. I think there are a couple other guys who don't have commitment dates yet that are going to be interesting to keep an eye on. Uh, I think Anthony Kennedy is one of them. He was the first commitment in this class from Missouri, and he was just on campus again and seemed to have really, really enjoyed it. Uh, Very interesting case of the recommitment. You don't see that a lot. Seems like he's deciding between Miami, SMU, and Missouri. So that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on there. Also, keeping an eye on running back Terry Hodges, who we know nothing about at all. That'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on if they want to land a second running back. He's a four-star, would be one of the higher ranked backs in the class. I think Missouri has showed no, tentativeness to go after two running backs in a recruiting class. So interesting one to keep an eye on there. And then there are plenty of guys we don't know. We don't have recruiting date or commitment dates for, like I mentioned earlier on. So plenty to keep an eye on here over the next couple weeks.
All right, lots of exciting stuff coming up. You mentioned your story on Keatron talking to him. Um, Interested to hear. Give the folks a little summary of your chat with Gavin Sidoir as well recently.
Yeah, the thing that stood out the most to me after talking with Gavin is he really recognized his role in this class before he's on campus, and that's to let everyone know why Missouri is the place to be. And it's really, really good to have a guy like that in your class. I think we saw that last year from guys like Jack Lang and Matt Zollers, and I think it really, really helped. Now, those obviously Lang is a Missouri guy, so you have ties there. Sidoir, like Zollers, is a Pennsylvania guy. So it's interesting stuff. Had an interesting quote about building a class around a quarterback, which I really found interesting. Said that they recruit around it, that they use it as the building block, and I completely agree. They had two commitments before Gavin Sidoir. Both of those guys backed out of those commitments, and since then they've landed two receivers, a tight end, a running back, and an offensive lineman. So if that's not building a class around a quarterback, I don't know what is. And certainly it makes sense. And when you look at last year with Matt Zollers, they had multiple receivers. You had a really fascinating tight end prospect. You had two four-star running backs. You had Jack Lang, a four-star offensive tackle. So it's not a foreign concept by any means, right? When you see teams, especially look at your powerhouse recruiters, nationally, like in Alabama, like a Georgia, when they get these five-star quarterbacks, they want to put as many five-star talents around them. Or in Ohio State, when they land a five-star quarterback, obviously they're known for landing their receivers. They can constantly put receivers around their top end quarterback. So makes perfect sense there. Um, he also had a really good quote about Eli Drinkwitz. Said he's not recruiting me anymore. He just talks to me about my future. So nice to know that is really a secure commitment with Gavin Sidoir, and that he's going to do what he can to make sure that this class continues to progress. So good stuff from him. Seems like when he mentions that the quarterback is a building block, he is that building block, and I think I don't want to say this directly, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of recruiting influence from Mr. Sidoir over the next couple of weeks when it comes to landing some of these guys, especially the ones that he was on an official visit with. I mean, Devyon Hill-Lomax had a picture on Instagram with Sidoir, if that means anything. So you have to think he has some influence in some of these decisions.
Right, yeah, especially with the pass catchers. And yeah, like you mentioned, last year, Drinkwitz had a quote on National Signing Day of last year talking about how Matt Zollers helped recruit specifically the two wide receivers in the class. And yeah, I mean, Jack Lane was pretty much working a full-time job to help recruit his classmates for that group. So interesting stuff from Gavin there. Make sure to check out both of Michael's interviews with them over on the site. Before we wrap up today, NBA draft's going on. This episode will come out shortly before round two kicks off. ESPN has Tamar Bates ranked as the 33rd best player available, Caleb Grill at 37. If you're interested in John Tanjay as well, not a lot of time spent with Missouri before that unfortunate injury, but if you care about John Tanjay, expect to hear his name called sometime tonight as well. But Michael, what would you say? How are you feeling about Tamar? Has your confidence in his draft chances changed for better or worse after round one?
It's really funny that you asked that. Talking with one of our reporters, Killian Wright, last night, that we're both less confident now. He had a ton of smoke and a ton of social media hype after the G League camp. He had a really good combine, and in that week or so after, in the mock drafts and the big boards, you see him in the middle of the second round, in the early second round, in the second round in general, but rising up from being an undrafted guy to the middle. Now, when you look at mock drafts, you don't see his name much anymore. So I'm getting concerned. I'm less confident about it happening now. I'd be surprised if Caleb Grill got picked. But when you get to the end of the second round, it's just like the back end of the NFL draft, the last couple rounds there. Uh, Teams have worked out so many of these guys, and if they had a good workout, if a team had a good workout uh, with Tamar Bates, like the one that comes to mind, obviously, is the Golden State Warriors. If that workout really went well, um, then it's very likely that they could take him. I know they have a pick in the second round. I can't remember where it is off the top of my head. I want to say it's in the earlier part of it. Um, so if that workout, hypothetically went super well, I wasn't, wasn't there, so I don't know how it went. But Yeah, so I don't know. Golden State picks with the 41st pick. That's kind of when you think of the range of where he could start to be selected. So you never know. With Caleb Grill, again, maybe he had a really good workout with one of those with the team, and they want to take a flyer on him. But More than likely, I would say Grill is a no, and for some reason, I have a bad gut feeling that Tamar Bates is gonna be a no, but I'm not in an NBA front office for a reason, so I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, once you get into the last section of picks, it becomes less about being so worried about who's on your draft board and more so just fit and, like you said, those connections and impressions through the workout. So we'll see with tomorrow. And at the very least, for both those guys, I'm sure we'll see them sign with a team shortly after the draft wraps up. So that's going to round it out for us here today on the All Things Mizzou podcast. We appreciate you tuning in and hope you do the same for the rest of our coverage over at Missouri Tigers on SI.